Hello. Been thinking about stuff, I guess. And that's quite a moon. Ugh, how is that even possible? It's beautiful. Let's see. Hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. I don't think I can flip. Can I flip? Will you let me flip? It will not let me flip. I'm very sorry. See if you can see that. I'm hoping you can see that. I'm trying to hold it as still as possible. Absolutely beautiful. That's probably going to screw up the recording. It's still going, but we'll see. I'm thinking about the... I've been listening to some audiobooks. Just sci-fi stuff that I've been meaning to get to. Since I listen to everything at 2 times, it's quite easy to devour audiobooks. So, library... I actually probably would do all right spending money on like Audible or something like that. But I'm cheap, so what do you want? Library books. There's a lot of libraries that are expanding into digital offerings and digital resources. This includes audiobooks. So I became curious as to how difficult it is to get signed up with one of these. And there's apparently only a few of these digital providers of content. So these libraries, basically, they pay like a monthly fee, I think, or probably a yearly fee to have access to these digital resources. And I don't know if they maintain a catalog or if they pay to have access to varying sizes of catalog, but there's definitely variation. The library in my city has one level of, access or level of access to a catalog, and a library in a city next to me, in which I also have a library card, because I'm nearby. They apparently have some kind of exchange program or something, and if they don't, you can sign up for $5 a year. So imagine that, $5 a year. So I think about this, and I'm sorry, let me complete that thought. So the city next to me has a separate catalog, and that catalog is different from the city that I'm in right now's catalog. So I have access to both of these. It's on the same system. It's called Overdrive, I think. And the city next to me still has access in another system called RB Digital. So I have like 3 catalogs to choose from. Oh, that's interesting. And, bouncing around between the 3 of those, there's an ebook or an audiobook that I'm interested in at any point, or if I'm trying to get direct access to a specific one, I can search across 3 of them. So this kind of got me thinking, what other cities nearby do I have access to with just my library card for my city? And if not, how much money does it cost to get a library card at those cities? Now, obviously, it would make very little sense to purchase a library card for a city in a state that you don't live in. However, if that city has a completely different library catalog from yours, then that's very valuable. I'm sorry, a different electronic library catalog. So I'm thinking about that, and like, it's just a library card. Like, how much testing for access or confirmation of identity is there really to get one set up? It's still a city, so it's like a municipal service. I imagine that they would allow you to, send them $20 a year to have access to it. They might not even have a system for allowing people that are outside of the state to be able to sign up for it. But it's an interesting idea, though. The idea that you could be in a completely different country and then via email or snail mail set yourself up with a Probably not snail mail, that would be. Anyway, you say like, I plan on traveling to your city, and while I'm there, I want to be able to have a library card, like something like that. I don't know. I feel like it would be rather easy to be able to obtain these library cards via the mail or email, as long as you could pay a small fee or something. But the idea of you being in a completely different country and getting access to all these digital resources just by virtue of having access to these library cards is really, really, really surprisingly simple and easy. Oh, that's an interesting idea. The fact that by merit of living in a city, you warrant access to this service. If you are not making use of it, what would it cost to outsource this service, if you know what I mean? Selling black market library cards. I love it. So, like, the audiobooks aren't a huge deal. You can zip through those, or I can zip through those pretty quickly. But ebooks I take a bit longer with, and it's an interesting idea because our library has extended. That's all licensing stuff I'm not really going to get into, but suffice to say, once you have an ebook, depending on what venue and what format you have it in, there are options, if you know what I mean. But that's a whole nother thing. It's just interesting to think about these, especially the library is a rather not very well used system, I think. A lot of them are becoming more digital. And I mean, Vox Day says we're a post-literate society, and it's not wrong. And I think that's a result of the technology access, the information overload that we have, that it creates what is it? That quote I keep forgetting. What information consumes? An excess of information creates an abundance of information creates a poverty of attention. So the limited resource is not the amount of news that you're allowed to intake. The limited resource is how much time you have in the day to devote to processing the amount of information that you are able to intake. This also jibes pretty well with the idea that you need mental downtime in order to, I think, live correctly, in order to just like be okay. In order to function normally, you need to be able to sit and stare at a wall for like 15 minutes at minimum. This is the idea of like the meditation fad that's come back around. The idea that you just need some time where you're not focusing on everything. Everything is a good way of putting it. I'm trying to limit my Twitter access some, and I'm probably going to have to do a hard limit because it's becoming a reflex to me, which is like Reddit got to be like a reflex to me, and I've done away with that at this point. But Twitter is becoming that, so I know there's value in it. It just needs to be measured out a bit differently, because especially for people who want to be productive like myself, you fill gaps in time. You find times where you're doing nothing and you think, well, I'm just not being productive right now. And well, actually, probably in order to be productive, you probably need to have some unproductive time. Or rather, you can view mental downtime as productive time if you acknowledge, if you handle that downtime in a certain way. If you handle that downtime by playing video games, I shouldn't say that. It kind of depends on the video game. I said that I play, or I played PUBG, and when I played PUBG, I would take a break from like a problem I was working on, or like a programming issue, I would take a break and I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll use this mental downtime to think about it. And then I would play PUBG, and it's super intense and basically, commands all of my faculties. But when I'm done, I walk away from it and I haven't thought a thing about the system, whatever it was I was thinking I was going to think about. So I believe there are, we actually had this conversation in a morning coding session. There were some college kids, I guess, that were there, and we're talking about catching ideas or getting ideas out of your head quickly. And we somehow got on to talking about mental downtime and how the downtime is important. And I was talking about video games. Like there's some things that I can do that occupy my brain on one side while the other side works on the problem, but I can't cross the streams. If I'm listening to an audiobook or listening to a podcast, I cannot write an email. And I think that's a linguistic thing, like you're doing. My linguistics are really good, but I still can't do that. I can't focus attention on listening to someone talk while I write an email using words. It just doesn't work for me. Now, designing a circuit board, I was kind of surprised that I was able to design, to work on the like the spatial aspect of moving stuff around on a circuit board, and the math aspect of placing these things in exactly the right position, and doing the math to figure out what the position exactly needs to be while I was listening to an audiobook. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I didn't think that was possible, because I guess I kind of figured it to be similar to coding. And this actually came up. So while we were talking about stuff you can and can't do, I brought that up about the circuit board in the audiobook. I said, but when I code, I think that it requires so much attention and so much, across hemispheres of the brain, that the only thing I can listen to is repetitive techno. And one of the other girls there that was very, clearly very experienced, was like, yep, drums and bass, that's what I listen to. I was like, cool, I listen to happy hardcore. But anything more complicated than that, like, I can't listen to Rachmaninoff while I'm coding, because I think about the pattern of the music and I get caught up in it. But heavy hardcore, I lovingly call it dumb techno, because it's very simplistic, it's very formulaic. I've heard probably 40% of it, which is saying a lot, actually. So a lot of it I have heard before, but it's just like the driving beat also helps. It keeps me pushing forward. But there's only certain stuff you can listen to, and the downtime is important in that regard. I also find that like if the kids are watching a television show that I've either already seen before or am entirely disinterested in, which unfortunately happens frequently. Oh no, well, we got them on, they watched Spirited Away, which was a little touch and go, but overall went well. They were happy they got through it. They went through it. It was a good experience. I haven't repeated it yet, but I imagine that's coming soon. But my wife started them on Howl's Moving Castle, and that was a much better fit, and they were very happy. They've seen it multiple times at this point, and I'm very happy to sit down and watch it with them, share that with them. But that's engaging. Like, I like that movie. I want to see that movie, and I want to see what my kids think about the movie and talk to them about it while it's happening. But if they're watching something more remedial, I'm happy, I'll just be sitting there mind blanking, and then ideas pop into my head, and then I usually jot them down real quick and move on, or go back to watching. So that kind of thing counts as mental downtime, because I'm essentially bored. I say mental downtime, but bored is probably the right word for it. Because what is this? What is this thing that I'm using right now? It is an anti-boredom device. It is designed to reduce your boredom, and many multi-million-dollar corporations spend a lot of money to figure out how to scratch your itch of boredom, and along the way they make a little money. So our boredom is being farmed, I guess. It's harvested or destroyed. I don't know. What? No. What? Oh, okay. He's got a... Yeah, that's fine. I just changed my headlights, and it came up behind this truck, and I could see in his tailgate one of my headlights and not the other. I was like, no, one of my headlights is out again. The other one's out, but he just had like a sticker and he removed it, so the other side was very matte and not reflecting anything. This is all very relevant for you to know and understand. Attention to detail. Attention to detail is actually something where you actually see what you actually see instead of glancing and assuming or filling in blanks and stuff like that. And that's a problem I think smart people have. If you see patterns a lot, it becomes almost a detriment, because you begin to anticipate patterns in things that don't have the patterns, and that's dangerous, particularly when it comes to people, because I think about the right way to put this. 90% of the time, if you're anticipating the pattern in a person, 90% of the time you're probably going to be right, depending on the intelligence of the person. However, you almost, I shouldn't even say 90% of the time, you almost necessarily, like there's a window of intelligence where you would probably be able to predict what is going to happen, or what they're driving at. And you're just like, skip to the end, come on, I know what you're talking about. And then after 3 minutes, they get to the end and you realize that you were exactly right. That doesn't really matter. I suppose you would measure your interactions with the people that you commonly interact with and determine if those are the people that you can successfully predict what they're going to say. But if anyone is outside of that window of intelligence, you have either the people at the higher end who are, beyond your skill level or your mental faculty, and they're off somewhere else. They're thinking about something else, and they'll give you novel ideas. But you also have the people at the lower end who are basically so low, they're separated from you by more than a standard deviation in intelligence, and they'll actually come up with interesting ideas that you never would have thought of, because to your mind they might just be dumb, but the point is, it'll get you to think about things in a different way. To say a broken clock is right twice a day is kind of denigrating, and not the way I want to say it, because I think that if your intelligence gets to a certain level, you become this little complexity machine, and you try to build complexity into systems, because you think the complexity simplifies things. Yeah. You systematize in order to reduce the complexity, I should say, but you don't necessarily need a system in every case, and people will, a smart person will use his spoon to stir the creamer into his coffee. A dumb person will just put the creamer in first and then pour aggressively. Let's end it on that.